a lot of pain, I think, in childhood will do one or two things. It'll either make you bitter and defensive and pull back and live fearfully, or it will give you a hunger to not live fearfully, but to really live boldly and to explore, the gift of life.
So, Catherine, it's great to have you here at LeaderPass Studios. I'm super excited about working with you on your new project, your new initiative, I know is what you're calling it.
Yeah.
And what an amazing topic. Watching you film today in studio, we're going to have a great rollout. I can't wait for everybody to see the content and as you build this on LeaderPass. And so thank you for being here.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so excited. And I just feel like, it was divine that I found your organization to help me make it happen. So thank you.
Yeah, you've had such a cool journey and so many things that I've learned and continuing to learn about you, even prepping for this moment right now before we turn the mics on. So I may want to hit some of that. But I want to talk about your background first. And you were a psychotherapist
Yeah.
for 20 years.
Yeah.
Is that right?
We'll go 20 plus.
20 plus. We'll leave it at the plus.
We'll just leave it at the plus.
I like it. I like that. So tell me about your background and how you got into that and then where that took you to come up with this really cool approach to parenting.
I noticed that throughout the course of my life that people would always come to me when they were having trouble. As a child, I was the safe person that people would come and talk to. I was the fallback friend. I was the one that would be there to help pick them up when they would fall. And so as I went to college, I began saying, well, what am I supposed to do with my life, right? And so I had narrowed it down to either law or therapy and psychology. And I really felt peaceful as I began to really think that through, that I was supposed to go into helping people be healed, right? And helping people really experience, I think, the fullness of why they were created. So I went that route, and it was the absolute right decision for me. It has never felt like work. It feels like breathing. And I always have a couple of non-negotiables. One is I always respect anyone who can walk through the door to see a counselor, because I think it takes a lot of
It
courage
does, yeah.
to be able to sit down and say, I'm really struggling. So I have incredible respect for people who are willing to do that. And secondly, I believe that as a therapist, it was my job to be the keeper of hope for them until they could have it for themselves. And so I
Love
always
that.
felt it was like an honor to walk a journey of someone's pain until they could get to the other side. So that was my early understanding of what I was to do. And as I've evolved and grown over the years, I really do believe that I was created to be a safe harbor for people to, dock to when tough times come. And then as we get through the storms, then they can go back out into the seas of their lives. So I've always seen that as my purpose. And so that's why I so believe in and love helping people.
And I guess that comes from you were sharing with me quite a bit of loss at an early age. And so that comfort for others, a safe place for them to dock, does that come from that experience?
I think that was a part of the thread, right? That just kept weaving together, that created the real picture that felt right. And so, a lot of pain, I think, in childhood will do one or two things. It'll either make you bitter and defensive and pull back and live fearfully, or it will give you a hunger to not live fearfully, but to really live boldly and to explore, the gift of life. I think because when you lose a lot of people to death, you appreciate life in such a way that you don't take it for granted.
Because you said
I had
like
12, there were 12 people from the time I was 5 to the time I was 13 that were very significant in my world who died unexpectedly. And that greatly impacts you and your sense of security and your sense of you can't take tomorrow for granted. And so you have to figure out what you're going to do with it at that age, right? And back then, when I was growing up, right, you didn't have counselors that you could go to, and it was not something that my parents were really aware of, that I was even in trouble until the very last death. And then I got very sick, and it was very much an emotional reaction to the loss of my grandmother, who was killed by a drunk driver. And so the most significant person in my world was taken from me suddenly, and she had been my rock of security, and when that was gone at 13, which is a horrible age
Oh
sometimes,
my gosh, yeah, yeah.
it really rocked me, and I internalized it and suffered physically for a while.
Mhm.
Um, got through it, but it changed me, and it made me really recognize, am I gonna live fearfully and be disconnected and not let anybody get close, which is what I did for several years? Or am I gonna really say, I wanna live and I wanna love and I wanna be bold? And I made that decision at 17 that I was like, I really wanna live.
That's awesome.
And so there started the journey.
Who did you have at that age that you turned to, or did you just not have anybody when you were at that
I really didn't
pivotal
have
point?
anybody. Um, I would find a guidance counselor at school to talk to,
Mhm.
but I really didn't have anyone that I could really go and pour my heart out to.
Hmm.
And so, except I had my faith. And so, um, that was one of the reasons I didn't feel so alone. It's because I really didn't feel like I was invisible to him. I felt like God saw me when maybe no one else saw me.
That journey, which is, I know, an important part. It's helped you from, in many ways, heal emotionally. You were telling us about
Mhm.
physically. You were telling
Yeah.
us about. So, why don't you share that for a second? Because I think that's an important part of who you are.
Are we talking about my most recent healing? I'm talking
Okay. Yeah.
about that one. Um, you know, faith has always played, not religion. Let me be really clear.
Okay.
I'm not talking about religion and a denomination. I'm talking about a faith, and for me, um, that's been having a real relationship with Christ.
Mhm.
So I always like I sit like this when I talk. Like when I'm praying, I will actually sit in two chairs and have a conversation like I'm talking to him as if he's there because I really
Cool.
believe he's really there,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And it's amazing what I hear back. So just going to tell you right now, I do listen and I do hear things. And so
Okay.
when I had my accident last year, I was in a really bad accident, and uh, I got hit by a forklift. It severed my hand from my wrist, and I can only say that you can just imagine the degree of pain. So I jumped up from what had happened, and I just remember hearing this voice say to me, "Catherine, sit down." And so I sat down, and then a few minutes later, really probably about 30 to 45 seconds later, I heard this voice say to me, "Don't look at your wound, look at me." And for me, I knew who the voice was. I knew it was God.
Hmm.
And I was like, okay, I'm going to just focus on you. I'm not going to look because I knew this was bad.
Feels bad. Yeah.
So I'm just going to think about what you would look like if sitting in the seat. Like, so you're sitting on the grass where I'm sitting. I'm just going to look and know that you're with me. Strangest thing happens. Someone who'd been helping me, it was a volunteer helping me that day with a situation that I was working on, runs down, kneels in front of me and says, "Don't look at your wound, look at me." Exact same words I had just thought I had heard God say to me. And then this next part was, Jesus wants you to know he is here, he's got you, and you're going to be okay. I needed to hear that because the situation was very, very
It's dire.
dire, right? The next 5 months would be incredibly complicated with my healing. The surgeon had one shot to save my hand, and he said he'd never seen an injury like it. He'd been doing it for 30 years, and he said, "Never have I seen anything like it." And I didn't have plan B and plan C. It was either this worked or I had to amputate. When I woke up from surgery and my hand was there, I was like, okay, we've gotten past the first hurdle. I have a hand. And now the next hurdle is the journey of healing. And over again, I would go back to the message of, don't look at your wound, look at me. I will be with, the whole idea, I'm with you, you're not alone. We got, and I will tell you that it just continued to be the strength that I pulled from having this incredible pain, complications that came with it, living alone,
Mm.
trying to live a life with one hand. And yet it was the greatest gift that I'd had, because out of all of that journey, what it did is I continued to see that I could rely on my faith. and that what I had believed all those years that sustained me from the youngest of years was still faithful to sustain me right now.
Mm.
And so, today
You have the use of your
I
hand.
have the use of my
This was
hand.
a year ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
About 18
amazing.
months ago. I mean,
That's a
if I
miracle.
did
Yeah.
this, you really wouldn't be able to pick out which hand unless I
No, yeah.
said it was this hand,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
This is the miracle. But it was a miracle that got walked out day by day because of my faith to believe that I wasn't alone, that in the midst of the pain that I still wasn't alone and that he was with me. And so I try to carry that sense of faith in everything that I do. I do believe that my faith is really alive and that I have this active relationship with him now. And so it can sound really crazy, but I got to tell you, it's the thing that gives me peace in every circumstance. And when I get fearful, I'll say, we got a truth tell. I need to tell you right now, I'm scared. I need you to know that. And it's just so great that I can hand that over
Tell him that.
and
Yeah.
tell him that and just know that he's got it. He listens. He's there. So I'm really respectful. I honor all people, and regardless if they have a faith, if they don't have a faith, I'm really honoring of wherever a person is. I just know what has worked for me
Mhm.
in really difficult times throughout the course of my life. That has been the strength that has sustained me again and again and again. And I'm so incredibly grateful.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. What, specifically we're talking, I know, about, parenting,
Yeah.
and you said something earlier while you were filming that, there's hundreds of books on parenting young children, but very few on parenting adults.
Yeah. Let
Yeah.
me tell you, there's like 30,000 books
Okay.
on over 18.
Okay.
I mean, under
Under
18,
18. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
30,000. I mean, that was the last count years
Unbelievable.
ago. I mean, just incredible volumes.
Mhm.
But I have done a recent search of looking for the number of books that are on this topic. There are no more than 30 in the world.
Are you serious?
Seriously.
On parenting
Adult
adults?
children,
Yeah.
right? It's just now starting where people are starting to say, "Oh, maybe we need to look at that." But even when you start digging into research, there hasn't been a lot of research done on this topic.
Mm.
So I find it fascinating because half the world, not just half the United States or half the state, I mean, half of the world are parents of adult children. And yet we're not talking about all the issues that impact the relationships of the things that are the most important to us.
Yeah.
So I think it's time.
Yeah. Well, I wanna get into, like, what you see as big, barriers for people and how to overcome them. But how did you figure out to take that step into that space? Were you did you speak somewhere, or have you just seen a pattern where people are like, "We don't know what to do," or
Well, here's
just
what's interesting. I earlier in my career, I started a parenting organization
okay.
and had a nonprofit on parenting for about 10 years. And during that time, it was from, 6 to 18. That was the age range that I was working in. Traveled all over the country, wrote a book on parenting during that time, and loved it. But my kids were getting older, right? And as my kids began to get older and I began to look at the issues that were relevant to them, I started looking to see, well, what's out there? And at that time, there was absolutely very, very, very little.
Okay.
So it's like, I need to pay attention to that. So as I began to pay attention and read and observe and get the questions from other parents, that's when I said, this is a need that I need to really seek out to help.
Mhm.
So back 2010, 2011, I started looking at it, writing on it. And a friend of mine said, hey, would you come up? I have a small group. She lives in Wisconsin. She said, would you come up and meet with our small group? We've been together for 20 years. We've raised our kids together, but now we're at this age. We could really use
Come
just,
talk about that.
yes,
Yeah.
just to talk
Yeah.
about that. And I
Yeah.
said, absolutely. A week before I arrived, she said, hey, would you mind if we move it to the church? A few people have found out that you're coming. And it was only supposed to be for like a group of 10 couples, right?
Mhm.
So I arrived there the following week and there's 200 people
What?
in 1 week's time.
Okay.
And they stayed, they came, they stayed, they did not want to leave
Hmm.
because there was so much pain and so much fear. And so many people didn't have answers on what to do. And it was at that point that I knew that this was an incredible need
Hmm.
that really then needed to be touched and people needed help.
Hmm.
Life happens, right? My own life happened, went through a series of events that were hard. and have just now found myself in a place where I can really come back to embrace what this journey is for parenting adult children. And my children are now older, much older than they were years ago, and very grateful for my own season. I've been a parent of adult child over 20 years now.
Okay.
So I have a lot more perspective, a lot of understanding of all the different phases that go with that. So I think it's the time is right for me to be able to step into this season in this world of questions and healing that needs to take place for people.
Mhm. Is there a mindset shift that you find, as you dive into that yourself and learned what you needed to, be able to communicate, or are there common problems that you see out of the on the outset that's like, if you can just begin here and start with this understanding, healing can happen or change can happen?
Yeah, I think there's probably a few things, but I would say we forget that they're adults very quickly because we have been there from the very beginning when they had to ask permission, when we had to wipe their noses and their butts. And, we had curfews and we didn't agree with their decisions and we had the power to stop actions that we
Yeah.
didn't agree with. So as they go into young adulthood, we seem to have difficulty in showing respect to the new season that they're entering and all the changes that they're going through neurologically, culturally, socially. And this is not an easy time to be a young adult.
Mhm.
The degree of uncertainty in every single area of life has not been prepared for, because if they can't come back to us, which they don't come back to us, if we're not the safe place because we're too busy telling them what to do, they didn't develop the skills to make decisions.
Mhm.
So therefore, they're going to make a lot of bad decisions if they didn't develop the skills to make
If you're making
decisions,
all of them for them.
or if you're making all of them for them.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think as we look to where do we start, it's we have to remember they're adults, and
Mhm.
we have to pay attention to our tone of voice. We have to pay attention. Do I treat them the way I would treat my neighbor who's an adult, or someone else's child who's an adult? How would I treat them? Am I treating my own children the same way?
Mhm.
And that's really where we get into problems, because a lot of times they perceive we don't take them seriously,
Mhm.
right? Or that we know better. And the truth is, a lot of times parents of adult children don't really know their children, even though they think they do.
Mm.
They live secret lives, they live separate lives, and they don't share their lives with their parents
Hmm.
because they know what their parents already think, because they live with them for the first 18 years.
Yeah.
So they know the things that they're critical about. They know the way they judge people. They know if they're graceful or gracious, or whether they're hard and critical. So all the things that they learn by osmosis in our homes, they don't forget when they leave.
Mhm.
And so we have work to do,
Yeah.
you know, maybe to repair some of the damage, maybe to reestablish trust. And we can do it because they really need it and they really want it. But we have to be willing to work to get it too.
Is there when you describe that, is there an age? Because I also think about parents that we've been around who try to act like their 11-year-old is an adult, or try to say, "Oh, they can make it." Is
Yeah.
there a how do you define that, like, based on what you've seen? Because there's obviously the wrong timing with
Yeah.
that philosophy.
I will tell you, I think the senior year of high school is a time to practice, giving them opportunities to learn how to make this, at least continue learning how to make decisions.
Mhm.
And because they're still in your home, you still have some element of control to be able to say, I'm not comfortable. So let's talk about why I'm not comfortable with that. So that way, that next year, whether they go to the military or they go to college or they go off on their own, now you've established, some experience and some history where you've seen how they make decisions, and then you can talk about it. But it's when they leave, that graduation has come, and whether it's in that summer or that fall and they leave, that's our clue. We really have to start paying attention to how I'm going to relate to them. And if it's with respect and kindness and with great curiosity, we have a far better chance of being able to keep those doors open.
Mhm.
But if we don't, they will close up really fast and those walls will happen.
What did you said a second ago something about, a different they're a different persona in front of you, or like
Yeah.
you're a different person. How did you phrase that with your kid? Is behaving completely different in front of their parent
Oh, yeah, it's
versus.
well, because kids learn real quickly what you will approve of, and they know what you like and what you don't like, and
Mhm,
then what's gonna make you mad and upset you, and especially if it does reflect a difference in the way they were raised. So if it's a value difference, if it's a priority difference, um, if it's just a decision that says, "This is how I'm going with my life," and I know that they're not gonna be happy, I'm just not gonna tell them,
mhm,
or I'm gonna lie about it. And that's the very last thing we want. You know, my daughter was in college and she got really, really sick. And I said, Tiff, you've got to go. You got to go to the infirmary and talk to them because I said, you've been sick now a while. You got to go. And she said, okay, mama, I'll crawl my way there. So she went. And so they said, I said, "Oh, have fill out the form so I can talk to the doctor so we can make sure I know, like,
permission, yeah,
what we
yeah,
really need to do. Like, do you need to come home? Whatever." She said, "Okay, I'll do that." So she goes to say, "Hey, I need to be able to sign a form so my mom can talk to the doctor." And the nurse said, "Oh, no, you don't wanna do that." And my daughter says, "Why don't I wanna do that?" She says, "Well, you may wanna take a pregnancy test, or we may find out you have this whatever." And she's like, "Oh, wait a minute. First of all, no and no. Neither of those are existing right now. Not happening in my life or my
mhm,
world. But let me be really clear with you. If any of this was to happen, my mother would be the first person I would call, not
mhm,
hide it from her."
mm,
And I think it reflected the culture. They were used to people not wanting
right,
anyone to know.
right,
They were especially the people who were paying the bill for them to be there. And it made me sad again. It's like we need to be the people they turn to when life is their their absolute worst moments.
mhm,
But if they think we're going to be mad, we're upset, and that doesn't mean we can't be mad. It doesn't mean we can't be upset. But there is a moment and a time and a way, and it isn't when they're in crisis,
right,
right? We need to be at our best when they're at their worst. We
yep,
can't be a reaction, but our fears will be the thing that drive us to react
hmm.
instead of respond.
You talked about expectations too along those same lines, and how
Absolutely.
that's a big, what'd you call it? The dirty word, what
It's
was
a
it?
dirty
The
word.
dirty word,
Absolutely.
expectations. Explain that, please. That was, fascinating.
Well, I don't think as parents of adult children that we really understand how many we have, right? But we have
How
them.
many expectations,
Yeah,
yeah.
and holidays bring out the worst because there is this subtle and sometimes blatant, "Well, when are you coming to see me?" It's just an assumption.
Mhm,
It's not a, "Hey, I would love to see you. Do you think there'll be any time for us to get together?" Those are two very different approaches. One shows respect, one has an expectation of what you should do.
mhm,
Well, that expectation puts a lot of pressure on that adult child.
hmm,
They're maneuvering a new season of their life. They may be dealing with new in laws, new patterns. And I'm over here going, well, you owe this to me. Because an expectation is a sense of you owe me something,
mhm, mhm.
right? We don't see it because they're our children. And we think, well, of course, this is what they would want to do.
Mhm.
So we make a lot of assumptions that go into expectations that then become problems and burdens.
So this could be like anywhere from expectations with holidays, like you
Yeah.
said, academic, sports. I mean, just go down the list.
Yeah, it
Is
can
it?
be who they're dating,
Okay.
the living arrangements they have,
Yeah.
the choices that they're making, their politics, even their faith. It
Mhm.
can be name it, and it can be a divisive, you know,
But don't those
wall.
come out of, I think about expectations, and I put myself through this filter. Don't those aren't those birthed out of dreams maybe for your kids? And you
Absolutely.
want this great, awesome relationship. So you want them to want to come home, or you have this great
Sure.
vision of what they can do with their talents and their gifts. So you want them to succeed.
Yes,
Ho
that's exactly
But
right.
that's a dangerous slope, it sounds like.
Well, I think it's one thing for us to have dreams. It's another thing to make sure that we're not forcing our dreams on our children.
Okay.
What about their dreams?
Mhm.
What about what they want? What and it's not that we can't encourage and say, "Hey, you do this so incredibly well." But when we tie our disappointment to
Mhm.
a decision that they make that doesn't match our expectation, now we have created a ripple that can become a tsunami.
Yeah. And I guess pairing what you said a minute ago with now you have a child who's not their true self in front of their parents. So
Right.
they're mirroring probably what they think their parents want,
Yep.
which is to try to align with those expectations, which there's your cycle as well.
Right.
It's a failure waiting to happen.
And it's sad because life is hard. Under the best of circumstances, life can be really hard. They don't need to have to worry about disappointing us and trying to keep us pleased.
Mm,
They have a lot more important things to do. We need to be their biggest fans. We need to be able to support them. That doesn't mean we financially give them money. It doesn't mean we're like having to be responsible for their lives, but it means we are here, we love you, and there is no if and or but connected to it. And probably maybe the biggest thing is my love for them isn't dependent upon what they do. I love them because they are and because they are mine.
mm,
Period. It can't be attached to performance or behavior or achievement. I need to love them simply because they're mine and they were created as a gift to the world.
mhm.
That sends a different message.
That's a big difference. And I guess, I attached something you said earlier as well during the filming of your program, and it was, how as a parent, if the child doesn't meet your expectation, um, as a parent, I'm the one that failed.
Right. Yeah. If I could take one burden off of every parent of an adult child, it would be do not attach your value to how your children turn out.
Mm,
Our job as parents happens to be us learning about ourselves and the role of parenting. It can't be attached to whether they achieve this or they perform that or they do this or they have this much money in their bank account. None of that matters to our value and what we've contributed. We have to separate those out because at the end of the day, if we labor over every mistake they made, then that means we're taking, ownership and responsibility for all the hard things. That also though means we get to take all the credit for all the successes.
mm,
Well, you can't have it both ways. We can't take all the blame and responsibility for all the mistakes and problems that they have and then turn around and not take all the credit for all their
so you're saying
successes.
if we take the blame, then we would be responsible for their success as well,
Absolutely.
but you don't wanna do that.
But you don't wanna do that
No.
because that diminishes them too,
Yep,
right?
yep.
Mistakes, we made mistakes, right? When we were growing up,
Sure.
we made mistakes. We can remember them probably vividly. But guess what? They made us better. They made us who we are. We learned from them. And some of us had to have a few repeat performances with some of them to really learn it. But at the end of the day, they contributed to our lives in a really rich way if we've chosen to let them. There's no reason to believe that our kids will not learn from the choices that they've made too. And, as a parent, naturally, we don't want them to suffer. We don't want them to have pain, but we can't control choices. And so, therefore, we just need to love them, support them when they're struggling, support them when they're succeeding, but it's their lives and we can enjoy and suffer with them, but we don't need to own it.
Hmm,
And my job as a parent isn't to be um, owning their lives.
mhm,
It's to be a part of it, but not owning it.
hmm. Talked about use the word grief when you were describing a way
Mm.
to accept certain things. Was it in that context that you had
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. I think sometimes we go through things with our children and we have a hard time letting go of what we think should be. I see it a lot with athletes, right?
Mhm,
Parents get excited. This kid has a scholarship. They're going to go off and they're going to go to play in college and then they're going to go pros. And there's just this, this is all we've done everything we could to make this moment happen. And then there's an injury.
mhm.
And now the student, the child has to grieve the fact that this injury has changed the course of their lives. But does the parent ever take the time to grieve what it means to them?
That it's gonna change the outcome of what they pictured.
It's going to
Yeah,
change the outcome of what they pictured. And
yeah.
now they're going to have to adapt. Not only is their child going to have to adapt and find a new dream,
Mhm,
but now they have to also be able to grieve the fact this isn't going to be what we thought it was going to be. It's not going to look like the way we thought it was going to look.
mhm.
Am I willing to own that, admit that, so I can now join my child and helping support them as they find a new dream?
Gosh, Catherine, it seems like that would even go beyond the injury. Like, what if it's just not the kid's dream?
Well, that's it. Oh,
What if they
listen.
enjoy it, but all of a sudden it turns into living through your kid and living
Oh,
through,
yeah.
and whether it's music or, I mean, we're picking on sports, but it's easy
Well,
to point out there
I
probably.
had an 18-year-old female athlete, very successful, sitting in my office, and she said, "I don't want to play this sport anymore." She said, "I've had 2 injuries." She said, I live in pain all the time, but my dad said, because I've paid for all your travel ball for all these years,
Mm,
I'm not going to pay for you to go. I'm not going to pay for college. That was your college investment. So now you have to go play."
mhm. To pay for college.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she was like, "I have no heart for it anymore." And she
Mhm.
said, "And I hurt every day and I don't know what to do." And you get the tears just
Oh, yeah.
ran. She said, "I didn't know that by doing this, that that's what this meant. I didn't understand that that was the expectation. And now I'm here and I feel like my life is over before it started."
Mhm.
And it was really sad. It was like,
Mhm.
and my work with her was to help her reframe about, well, let's talk about what you want to do. Let's talk about what this means. How can we get unstuck from here?
Mhm.
And sometimes, parents will come alongside, and sometimes people have to figure out, am I going to do this without the support that I really need?
Mhm.
And it's hard.
You had a parent growing up, we talk about your dad,
Yeah.
and early on wasn't super, didn't have the tools or the knowledge to be supportive.
Yeah. I knew
Um,
he loved me. The one thing I did know is that my
okay.
dad deeply, deeply loved me. My dad did not know how to parent me. And my dad was a minister, and so he loved people and he cared deeply. My dad was not a man who would ever show judgment towards anyone, and so I knew that he loved the world. I didn't feel like I was someone that he knew what to do with, and so our relationship was really hard from the time I was 5 to the time I was 25,
As a
and
father-daughter
as a
relationship.
father-daughter, yeah,
Okay.
and I so bad wanted to be connected to him. I tried so many different ways to connect with him, because I just had such respect for who he was and for how he lived his life, because he really was so deeply sincere and so giving and caring. And and in fact, one of the things I loved most about him was he used to say, "I'm conservative in my theology, but I'm liberal in my treatment of people." And
Mm,
I loved that
that's cool.
part. But it was a hard relationship, and it impacted me. And I had to figure out, how do I heal from being fatherless who with a man who was a father to so many other people?
Wow.
And so I had to work on that. And I went to him and had that conversation. And I was so blessed to know that, you know, for the last 30 years of my life, I had an amazing dad who really was the father
So
I
he was
always had
willing
dreamed of.
what did he do? Or how did he learn? Or how did he?
He said to me, he said, "I made a lot of mistakes with you." And
Okay.
he said, "I can't undo them." He said, "The only thing I can commit to you is I can be a different dad moving forward. And I give you my word that for the rest of my life, I will be the dad that you
So he
need."
owned it.
He owned it,
He owned it and committed to doing
committed,
that.
owned it, and lived it. And
Mm,
from that moment on, there was never a time that he was not the dad
mhm.
that I had dreamed of having.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
That's
Very,
amazing.
very fortunate.
Yeah.
And, but it also has given me incredible hope, right? That it's never too late
Mhm.
for parents of adult children to redeem and restore the mistakes that they may have made. Because the truth is, we all make them, right? Some of them are bigger than others. Some our children remember in ways that we didn't even know were a big deal, and some we
Right.
remember that they have forgotten.
Right.
But at the end of the day, I think at the core of most people, they want to be in a connection with their parent,
Sure.
right? But we have to do the work. We
Mhm.
have to look at how are our fears getting in the way, which
As a
oftentimes,
child or parent?
as a parent,
As a parent, yeah.
we have to look at how our fears interfere in our ability to relate, because
Mm,
they're also very tied up with expectations,
mhm,
right? And if we can be the first to model what growth looks like and take ownership and really work on us being ourselves being healthy as parents of adult children, we're modeling for them opportunities to redeem and restore, to heal, forgive, and to connect. And I think that's what healthy families do.
mhm,
It's not about being perfect. It's not about having the answers. We can do it together as long as we listen and we're open and we're teachable and we're willing to own our part.
mhm. as parents listening to this and thinking, "Oh, man, now what?" Is that a ownership thing? Is that how what would be a tip you could give or what would be advice you could give to
Yeah,
take that's a scary step because you're not only having to have grief over an expectation that's no longer gonna be here, the loss of that almost,
right.
of that dream or that vision of for your child, but you have to, man up or woman up and own that.
Yeah.
What do you do? I mean, what do you tell them?
I think we need to have some self-awareness. I think the very first thing is we often, and especially with our adult children, we forget that our children often know us better than we know ourselves. They know
Interesting.
our
Yeah,
quirks, they
yeah.
know our buttons, they know all those things. And we forget that they're impacted by those. And so we have to put the mirror up and ask ourselves some hard questions. You know, am I asking questions or am I making assumptions? Am I using my history of what I knew to be the currency that I'm using for who they are now? And I think we need to really not assume with our adult children. We need to stay curious. We need to be asking questions. We need to say, do we have the kind of relationship that you'll come back and be honest with me? Because I don't ever want you to keep secrets from me. And am I the kind of parent that you would keep secrets from?
Mm. So you mean ask those kind of questions? Because I was picturing you saying as parents, ask questions like, "What's going on? What are you doing?" And that feels like you're judging and checking up and
Yeah.
and trying to hold them to this picture you
Oh,
have.
yeah. No,
So
no.
it's not that.
It's not that.
Okay.
That's gonna take you
Okay.
over the cliff
Yeah.
really fast.
Yeah.
The questions that you ask have to do with what do you need from me to be the parent that you need right now?
I like that. Yeah.
Like, how can I best support you
Mhm.
with what you're going through? You know, this is a new season. Is there anything that's hard that, we can talk about? I don't want you to be in the world alone. Is there anything between us that makes that? Because I sincerely want to know. But if we say that, we can't be defensive. We can't justify, explain, and defend ourselves. And we have to really be willing to hear what they have to say.
Mm.
And if we're willing, they'll be willing to more likely to tell us. But if they know we're just lip servicing just to be able to,
'Cause they can spot it.
they can spot it. I'm telling you, we can't pull anything over on them.
What was it that you said, our oh gosh, it was something like, "Our kids won't ever love us as much as we love them because we've been with them the whole time."
Yeah.
Say that
No,
again?
I'm a big believer that our children will never love us as much as we love them. We experienced their history.
From
They
day
did
one. Yeah.
from the moment they came into our lives, right? They didn't experience our history. They don't know our stories. They've heard some things, but we know their stories. We were there for every burp, for every cry, for every snotty nose, for every laughter. We were there. They don't know us that way.
Mm.
So we have to pay attention to our expectations even around how they love us back. Our job was to release them and set them free, and their job was to quote move on and and to move forward.
Yeah.
So we had different jobs, right? Around the same purpose, and that was to set them up to be successful human beings.
Mhm.
But we have a hard time letting go
Hmm.
because it's our heart walking around outside our bodies.
That's great.
So,
That's exactly right. Okay, you're a child now and you've got a relationship with a parent that you want to have this relationship, this restoration that you had with your dad.
mhm.
What do you tell the child to do if the parent's resistant? Do you just hang in there or do you just wait? What do you do?
What I would say to that adult child is I'd say, you keep working on you. You keep working on being healthy. And remember, if you have children in your own lives, learn to be sure you don't replicate what was done with you
Mhm.
that's not working for you now. Make sure you're doing it differently with your children
Mhm.
because the pain, while it may still be there and it may never go away because not every parent is going to get their act together and work on it, it will not be wasted. If you learn from that moment, you will turn around and make an incredible difference in the lives of your own children. So use it to your advantage. I will tell you, I parented very differently in a lot of ways than I was parented. And it was because I remember as a child, I don't want my children to feel this way.
Mm.
And I made my mistakes. I own my mistakes and I've made them. I just didn't want to make the same ones.
Mhm.
And I want to be sure that I was paying attention to the things more quickly that would allow my children to have the relationship and say, "Mom, we need to talk," or "This isn't working," or
Mhm.
there's something here we need to really chat about.
Mhm. If you think about, I guess, the last 10, 20 plus years we talked about, that you've been seeing people and working with people and in this arena, what do you see nowadays? We have social media is different, AI is different. I mean, everything's probably continuing to evolve with these problems. Are you seeing common threads? Or are you seeing some totally new scenarios that we have to be aware of?
No, I think we have to be aware because I think what happened, I will always go back and say 9/11 changed the world because I believe from that time on, parents became even more frightened around their kids and about their kids. And I think if you come back and you look at the anxiety levels of today's adulthood is off the charts.
Mm.
And I will tell you, we do in my day job. I'm a consultant in an organizational health company. We assess. We do a lot of key assessments, and I've never seen so many anxious young adults in my life.
Really?
Their anxiety is consistently off the chart, significantly different even 5 years ago before COVID.
Mhm.
Their ability to not get stuck is really high.
Hmm.
And so it's not that I don't think they're not capable. I just think we as a culture and we as parents of children, we have to be able to keep empowering them and believing in them. And so, you know, when young adults struggle with confidence, we need to be able to not join into the fear factor, but we say, let's talk about it. What do you need in order to get unstuck? I know you can do this. You're smart, you're capable, you have all these skills. Let's talk about what do we need to do to get rid of the fear because you've got this.
Yeah.
And it's like instead of getting out and fixing it for them, walking alongside them and letting them have the struggle, but knowing that if they fall, they're not going to die from the fall.
Mhm.
They're going to get back up and they'll do it again.
Are you saying that from a corporate perspective? Because you do that in corporate
Yeah,
America
but
right
I'm
now.
saying that from any perspective,
Okay.
regardless of
If
the
you're the
age.
adult in their life.
If you're the
Yeah.
adult in their life,
Yeah.
and we do work with leaders who are having to deal with the younger generation. We're saying be patient with them. They just don't know what they don't know yet,
Mhm.
right? But at the end of the day, it's about fear, anxiety, and if we have a broad base of a culture where this is the norm now
Mhm.
because of all the expectations of all the definitions of perfectionism that they see in social media that are not real.
Right.
None of it's real,
Mhm.
right? But they believe it's real. And the propeller blade of coming to terms with what their world is versus what they perceive everybody else's world feeds the anxiety.
Mhm.
So we just have to really keep people grounded while they're still at home. But once they leave, we can still keep them grounded, but we have to just do it respectfully and we have to be really curious and, again, not rescue.
Right.
But that's
Right.
hard sometimes.
Very hard. And to let them create their own true life of who they are,
Right.
in that process. And
And
be
letting them know that it's if they make a mistake, it's okay.
Yeah.
You know, you're going to figure it out. We're going to be here. We're not abandoning you if you make it. We love you. We'll get up, help you stand up and go at it again. It's just not constantly rescuing. We just can't always rescue,
Mhm.
which is sometimes what we want to do
Mhm.
because our heart hurts when we see them hurting.
Right.
Totally understandable.
Yeah, and fix it. But to encourage and to give them confidence.
Absolutely. And to believe in them, say, let's get curious. What are your options? You know, what do you let's list them.
Mhm.
There's always more than two options. Well, let's come up with what do you think they are?
Mhm.
And let them tell you instead of us dictating all the options, right?
Mhm.
We have a tendency to say, well, you can do this and you can do this and you
Oh,
can do
like
this.
present them with every option
Right.
so they're not thinking.
Right. They don't have to think. Right. And basically it insults them. When we constantly feed them answers, it's saying, I don't believe that you have enough sense to figure any of this out on your own. I don't want to insult my young adult children or my adult children at whatever age. I need to believe in them. Let them struggle a little bit. Let them figure out how to go find answers. You can be a wall for them to bounce against, but we can't feed them because that basically says you're helpless. You can't do this. I need to do it for you. Well, how's that going to help their confidence?
Hmm.
It's not.
So you're thinking about your new program, parenting adult children today.
Mhm.
Is taking all the great stuff and all the lessons that you've been learning yourself and working with people and packaging that into essentially a training. is
Yeah.
the way this is shaping up. Talk a little bit about that and the heart behind it.
Well, I think, we want to be able to get the message out in as many ways as possible. So whether it is offering courses online where people can go in and work at their own rate to say, this is my issue. This is where I'm struggling. Let me jump in and see what's available. Um, there's going to be opportunities as we continue to grow and unfold. We'll have events. Um, we'll do all kinds of what I consider to be like there'll be trainings, like live trainings
Yep,
that they can
workshop. Yep,
workshop
yep, yep,
formats. So I want people to be looking out for all the different ways we intend to get out here and try to meet as many needs as possible.
yep.
Because the truth is, there's a lot of issues because it's really complicated. You know, there's a lot of issues that parents of adult children face,
Yep.
and like I said, we need to talk about them and let parents have some resources and support because a lot of them feel very alone and they don't know who to talk to and they have a lot of shame around it. And
Right.
when we find out we're not alone and we bring light to it, um, it's amazing the healing that can take place.
Yep. And you're breaking these down into personal stories. You're teaching very specific tactical things, which I love.
Yeah.
I'm big into don't just tell me what's wrong.
Yeah.
Help me out here. And so these are handles for people to grab a hold of and apply in their own lives.
Yeah, absolutely.
With their adult children, really with their kids along the way too. I should have to say,
Yeah.
if you start earlier,
Oh yeah, no,
life is better.
I think whatever you're learning here, it gets
Yeah.
to move forward. But I think that parents are hungry and ready to get some of the help because it has been a very isolated issue. People always talk about their children when they get together if you have adult children,
Mhm.
but they also talk about the heartbreak, the concerns, the worries, the fears, what's working, what's not working. It happens in every group that I'm a part of.
Mm.
The issues come up. But it's like no one is helping people have the tools to get unstuck from where they currently are. And that's what I think is what this initiative is to do, is to help people get unstuck so they can heal, they can restore, they can move on, they can improve and strengthen. Because I don't think it's as important on how we start as parents. I think it's really important on how we end.
Mm.
And I think that's the message. It's never too late to heal a wounded relationship,
Mhm.
especially one that is so intimate and tender as that of having our children.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. Well, there's so many subjects and topics that you can cover.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to watch this unfold for you. And I'm excited for people to actually learn more, not just a one and done from you. This is not just, I'm going to write the book and
Right.
do a course and be done. We talked about this. This is an ongoing,
Yeah.
evolving thing that's going to help a lot of people. Where right now, if people wanted to find you or be able to connect with you, where are the best places for them to do that?
Check out our website. It's Parenting Adult Children Today, and there's
.com?
.com.
Okay.
And so that's the first place because our official launch. We're just getting started, so
Yep.
we're running fast, and a lot of good things are going to happen. But that would be the place to keep up with all that's happening and unfolding.
Yeah.
So
And people will get a taste test of even what you're doing on LeaderPass as a free preview
yeah,
there as well. So that'll
absolutely.
be really cool to see in action and actually get some great value from that as well.
Yeah, it's exciting to see that a little bit can go a long way. I think what we just even did in the studio, I think if just practicing that little bit,
Oh yeah.
I think may have a pretty big ripple, and that's
Yeah, one of your premises, one of them, if they would do that, if we would do that,
yeah,
is going to make a big difference.
yeah, that's what I
So,
hope.
well, I'm excited that you're here and to work with you and to get to know you and also to do more and probably have you back on the podcast because I have a
Thank
feeling we typically get questions. And I know
Yeah.
people would love to ask some very specific questions because the key word in your course is today. It's
Right.
what's happening right now
Right.
and how to apply it. So thank you for being here, though. It's been a joy having you and great talking to you today.
Thank you so much.
All right. Up high.